We are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share this video so you can help the podcast grow. And please follow me at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter and at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook. Links to those will be down in the description below. So, fair warning to all of you at home, this podcast is going to be a little bit different than usual, and this week is going to be a little bit different than usual. And the reason for that is because it is just going to be the podcast this week. There are no clips for me to do, at least at the moment. I may find some creative ways to get some clips out there for you guys, but as of right now, that is not the case. It is just going to be this one video, and the reason for that is because I have one topic to speak about and one topic only, and that is NFL free agency. Now, why, you might ask? The reason is because, if you do not know, there have been quite literally hundreds of moves, whether it's trades, whether it's signings, re-signings, releases, whatever the case may be, there have been hundreds of them. So if I were to sit here and go over every single one, first of all, I wouldn't know what I'm talking about with half of them. Second of all, I'd be here for 6 hours. So, luckily for me, and luckily for all of you, I will not be doing that. Here's what I will be doing. I will be doing something similar to what I've done with the NBA and the MLB so far this year, and obviously in years past as well. I am going to be doing grades for not every single move, because again, 6 hours, but for every single team this offseason. So, all 32 NFL teams, I am going to grade them and their offseason. Now, this will include draft stuff, this will include free agency stuff. Obviously, the draft hasn't happened yet, but for instance, obviously, with the Panthers trading up to number 1, I kind of have to include that. With the Bears trading back from number 1, I kind of have to include that. Things like that. So, I'm going to be including all things NFL offseason in these grades, and I am going to give my pre-draft grades for each of the teams this offseason. So, if you guys are excited, or if you have anything that you want me to talk about, if the kind of vocalization is loud enough and the cry is loud enough for me to talk about something this week. Obviously, this will come out on Friday, possibly when you're watching this. If not, it will have come out on the previous Friday of whenever you're watching this, probably. So, obviously, with no clips going on this week, there'll be about 7 days where there's nothing, or 6 days where there's nothing. So I have time to record something, talk about something if the cry is loud enough. So if there is anything you guys want me to talk about other than NFL free agency, please let me know. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoy, and hopefully you guys stick around all the way to the end, because obviously there's no real rhyme or reason to kind of the order of which I did things. I kind of just went in a random order, not necessarily completely random. There's, it's going to have, some kind of structure to it. I didn't just say, I'm going to talk about this team, this team, this team. No, I just kind of did a list of all the teams, and I'm just going to talk about them and give grades in whatever order it goes. So hopefully you guys enjoy. And with that, let's get started with the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals, I'm going to give them a C-. And the reason for that is, again, quite frankly, I don't really know what's going on with the Cardinals. I don't really see the vision. I had a lot of expectations for the Cardinals over the last couple of years. Maybe not necessarily this season. I did think that they probably wouldn't be all that good. But the prior seasons, last couple of seasons before that, I really had high hopes for the Cardinals. I thought they had a good young defense. I thought that their offense, with all the trades that they had made, would be pretty solid. And it just hasn't turned out. It hasn't worked out for a multitude of reasons. And now I just feel like the Cardinals have, given up. I mean, I don't really see any other thing that's going on. I just feel like they've given up on Kyler Murray, which, you may say is warranted or not. It feels like that's what's happening. They've gotten rid of their young weapons and kept their old ones. Their defense hasn't really improved, which is sad considering how many young players they have on that defense. Chandler Jones, their big-time pass rusher, left last year. It just hasn't looked good. And this year, Kelvin Beachum and Will Hernandez and Kaiser White are not going to solve your problems if you're Arizona. Certainly not the worst offseason I've seen. It's not like they've made any horrible moves or anything like that. But C- is what I'm giving them. It doesn't really do anything for me. The Atlanta Falcons up next. I'm going to give them a B-. Much more flashy offseason for the Atlanta Falcons than obviously the Arizona Cardinals and just than the Atlanta Falcons over the last few years. I feel like the Falcons haven't been very active in free agency the last few years, and this year they are looking to change that. Jesse Bates moving over from Cincinnati to Atlanta. Obviously, Jonnu Smith, Lorenzo Carter. They re-signed their guard Chris Lindstrom, among a whole bunch of other things. So, for me, I think that that combined with David Onyemata, I think being an absolutely perfect fit in Atlanta, I think that for me, a B- is fair, and the reason is because I do think that with pretty much everything that I just said, David Onyemata, Chris Lindstrom, Lorenzo, well, maybe not quite Lorenzo Carter, but Jesse Bates, definitely Chris Lindstrom. I think that they overpaid. Jesse Bates, I love Jesse Bates, but I think that where the Falcons are versus how much money they are now tying up in a safety that's not getting any younger and that will only have so much impact on their defense and on their team as a whole, I'm just not sure that it was worth it right now. But you never know. In 2 years, this team might explode and be fantastic, and Jesse Bates will be a big cog in that, and it won't matter how much money you're paying him. But as of right now, I think that and the Chris Lindstrom move were probably both huge overpays. So for that, it's going to take it down from probably a B or a B+ down to a B- for me. Next up, we have the Baltimore Ravens. So the Baltimore Ravens, what I gave them is a D. And you know what? I want to give them worse, but you know what? They at least kept Lamar Jackson for a year, at least so far. You never know, I guess. If they somehow lose Lamar Jackson, then, I'd probably give this offseason an F, obviously, for losing their franchise quarterback. But if I were to go back in time and you were to tell me, hey, here's where the Ravens are going to be in 2 years. Lamar Jackson's a free agent. If you want to win a Super Bowl, what are you going to do? I probably would have said, well, you want to sign Lamar Jackson to an extension. Definitely. Okay, well, what if you can't do that? All right, you want to buy one more year of a championship window. That makes sense. So, it seems like they don't have a lot of weapons, because they don't. So, what you're going to do is you're going to franchise tag your quarterback, make sure he doesn't leave, make sure you have one more year to convince him. And what you're then going to do is you're going to spend some money on some free agent wide receivers because there are some decent ones in this year's free agency class. And you're going to draft some more weapons for him. You're going to maybe sign a couple of offensive linemen that are going to actually try and help protect him. And you're obviously going to try your best to retain some guys on your defense that are helping you out. The Ravens did almost none of that. They franchise tagged Lamar Jackson. But other than that, they didn't do anything else to bring in any kind of weapons, any kind of help for him. And I don't see any reason why Lamar Jackson would want to stay in Baltimore. Obviously, the coaching staff and Lamar work well together. Obviously, the fans love him. It seems like he enjoys being in Baltimore. But the problem is when your team doesn't surround you with weapons, after a while, if you're a franchise quarterback, you have to know that you are more valuable to another team who's about to win a championship than you are to whatever team you're on. If they're not going for it, what's the point of being in the NFL? So, I think, quite frankly, the Ravens have done nothing to show me, Lamar Jackson, or their fan base that they're serious this year. And they're in a good division. The Bengals just keep getting better, guys. The Bengals almost went back to the Super Bowl again last year. So it's not like you have nobody in your division that's any good. So I don't get it. Maybe they don't think that with any moves that they can make, they'd be better than Baltimore or better than Cincinnati this year. I don't know. But regardless, I'm giving it a D, my apologies, because they just haven't really done anything, quite frankly. They haven't done anything this offseason to make me believe in them at all. And if they lose Lamar Jackson, they're getting an F. The Buffalo Bills are up next. I'm going to give them a C. they didn't really do anything this offseason to impress me. They obviously re-signing Jordan Poyer was a big deal for them, and I'm very, very happy that they did so. Extending Matt Milano as well, keeping two veteran guys, veteran leaders on that defense was important. Those are good things. Connor McGovern doesn't really do much for me. Deontay Hardy, almost almost $7 million a year for a punt returner. I don't know. It doesn't really do anything for me. And again, they re-signed their kicker and their punter, or it just doesn't really do much for me on either side. So I'm going to give it a flat C. Nothing crazy, but nothing really bad either. Carolina Panthers, I'm going to give their offseason a B, and it actually was going to be probably a B-, but I'm changing it to a B because right before I started recording, they did sign Miles Sanders, who I'm a big fan of, former Philadelphia Eagles running back. So I think that, obviously that makes their offseason a little bit better. Now, here's why it's not an A. They overpaid so much for the number one pick. Wow, did they overpay. Look, I understand how important a franchise quarterback is. I really do. But you traded Robbie Anderson last offseason, so really the only weapon you have is DJ Moore, and you traded him away to get your quarterback who now has cardboard boxes to throw at. I mean, I don't even know anyone else on that team that can catch the ball right now. Maybe I'm forgetting somebody obvious, but for me, I'm not coming up with any names that are going to jump out at me in that receiving core right now. So who is CJ Stroud or Bryce Young going to throw to at this point? And no, I'm not saying Anthony Richardson at number one because he's not going to be number one, and neither is Will Levis. It should be CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. And I think it should be Bryce Young, even as an Ohio State fan. I'm still saying it. But who are one of them going to throw to? They don't have any weapons. Are they going to throw to Andy Dalton? I mean, they signed Andy Dalton. That's cool. They signed Hayden Hurst for $7 million a year. But he's not getting any younger, and he's definitely not going to be a number one target. So I guess you have Hayden Hurst. Other than that, you got nobody. So, I like the couple of moves that they made. I think that they do have a lot of holes. But I think that, unless you're going to focus on weapons in the draft after you get your quarterback, I mean, I just think that you're really sending whoever you draft at number one overall to the Wolves. So, we'll see. But I think B is a fair grade because I do like the moves that they made in the offseason. It obviously doesn't fix all their problems. I think that if they didn't really highly overpay, because they didn't just trade DJ Moore. They traded 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks as well to move up 8 spots. So, for me, I think it just was a massive, massive, massive overpay. And I think if you didn't overpay by too much, I might have given you a B+ or an A-, despite the fact that you don't really have any weapons. I think if you didn't trade DJ Moore, I definitely would have given them probably an A-. But they did, and so I'm giving them a B. The Chicago Bears had one of my favorite off seasons this year, and for kind of along the same lines that the Panthers, I gave them a bit of a lower grade than I originally anticipated. I'm giving the Bears an A- because I love the offseason that they've had. They traded the number one pick, which for those of you guys who saw my top 10 mock draft video, you'll see that I basically pleaded and begged the Chicago Bears, you have to trade the number one pick. You cannot have that. You've got to rebuild through the draft. You need a ton of great players to really catch yourself up. And not only did they do that, but they have had one heck of a active offseason. They signed Nate Davis, a guard out of, I believe, Tennessee is the last team he played for. He may have played for another team after that, but I know Tennessee, he was on there. And again, there's so many free agency moves, I can't keep track at this point. But Nate Davis is going to help shore up that offensive line, which they desperately need because that offensive line is absolutely atrocious. They also, obviously, as I said, they traded for DJ Moore, which gives Justin Fields a good weapon to throw to, other than, obviously, Darnell Mooney. But my favorite move that they made was signing Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker from Buffalo. 1, because I don't have to see him in my division anymore, and 2, because they actually got a really good replacement for Roquan Smith, which I didn't think I'd be saying. But Tremaine Edmunds, he came into the NFL at 19. He's played for 4 years. And now he's 24 years old, or 5 years, whatever it is. He's 24 years old, and he's getting paid. So you're not paying some 26 or 27-year-old linebacker. You're paying still a 24-year-old, which means he still has plenty of time to develop and mature, not only in life, but on the field as well. So I think that was a huge move for them. There are, I do think that they can maybe do some more on the offensive line. So I don't think this is a perfect offseason by any stretch. And I'm very intrigued to see what they do in the draft this year because obviously they now traded back 8 spots. So are they going to take another wide receiver? Are they going to take an offensive lineman? I think they should take an offensive lineman. But, we'll see what happens. So I'm giving it an A- for now because the jury is still out on what they're going to do with these picks. Because, again, I'm hinging a lot of this grade on how well I think they did in that trade. But if they don't use those picks, it's kind of like putting your money into a retirement account, but then never taking it out. That's what it's like if you blow all your draft picks, right? You save up all this money for later on, but then if you don't use any of that money, or if you, God forbid, you save all that money in retirement and then you take it all out to go on a vacation to Las Vegas or something like that. No offense to the Raiders, obviously, but we all know what Las Vegas is. So it's like doing that. You're just blowing all your money and you just wasted all those draft picks for no reason. So draft picks are only as good as what you end up doing with them. So the jury's still out on exactly how good this offseason is, but I think down the road, this could turn out to be a defining offseason for the Chicago Bears. I think if they hit on those draft picks, they may really, really do some damage in the next few years and really be able to round out the team with some good draft picks and good free agency moves to complement everybody. So I think this is a huge offseason, but I'm not ready to give it a perfect grade yet. A-. Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to give them a B-. Not really a ton to speak on. Obviously, they lost Jesse Bates, so I think that the grade that I probably would have given went down a little bit more, but they signed Dalvin Tomlinson, who complements their team very, very well. They obviously retained Sione Takitaki. I believe he was on their team last year. He might not have been, but either way, I love Sione Takitaki, if any reason, because his name is Sione Takitaki, and I could say Sione Takitaki all night long, and it would make me very happy indeed. So, for me, not a whole lot of flashy moves. You lost Jesse Bates, but you know what? I have learned that it doesn't really matter what the Bengals do in the offseason because they're going to be good despite everything else. And I think that last year also was a huge free agency year for them, so I'm kind of taking that in it as well. They're probably not going to make huge flashy moves. They're not going to make any big free agent signings, probably. So, I'm taking it with a grain of salt. I'm giving them a B- because, again, for me, it may not have been flashy, but I think it definitely got the job done. And again, Dalvin Tomlinson is a big signing, so I guess that counts as well. And I pretty much knew as soon as last year happened and they spent all that money, they weren't going to re-sign Jesse Bates. And I don't think they should have signed Jesse Bates, but that does leave a reasonably big hole in their secondary, which wasn't all that great to begin with. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But B- is what I'm going to give them for now. Dallas Cowboys. I'm giving them a C. I think they did some good things, and I think they did some bad things. So they're going to be right in the middle. I hate that they had to cut Ezekiel Elliott, but I feel like maybe it probably was warranted. And for me, I think that it would have been fine had they re-signed Tony Pollard to a long-term extension, but instead you franchise tagged him because it seems clear he doesn't want a long-term extension. And so if you lose him in next offseason, it's going to look really bad because now you got nobody running the football, as opposed to having arguably the best 1-2 punch in football. You might have no one by the end of this season if Tony Pollard decides to leave. You also re-signed Leighton Vander Esch, who had obviously a phenomenal rookie year and hasn't gotten a ton of a lot better since then, but he's still a solid player and he still knows that system very, very well, and he plays an important role. So I think it's great. I think it was good that you re-signed him. I think obviously restructuring the Tyron Smith contract works out as well, and you get a little bit of help in the secondary with Donovan Gilmore. That's not right. I combined two names. Donovan Wilson and Stephon Gilmore, safety and DB, obviously, respectively. So I think that there's some good moves. but I think there's some moves that you may have wanted to make, but that you couldn't. And so I'm going to give it a C for now. Denver Broncos, another pretty good offseason here. I am going to give it a B+. I think that last year you saw that their offensive line was not very good, and obviously neither was their quarterback. But this year they've made some big splash signings, Mike McGlinchey being probably the biggest, really shoring up the right side of that offensive line, assuming Mike McGlinchey is going to play right tackle as he has been doing his entire career. They signed Zach Allen, one of the best defensive pass rushers, as opposed to offensive pass rushers, apparently. Pass rushers, I don't know why I had to say it like that, but pass rushers in this free agency class. They signed him. They obviously signed Ben Powers, who's kind of played all over the offensive line throughout his career, which has been really nice. So obviously that's a big signing for them as well. So again, and they made a couple of other minor moves. So you know what? Good for the Broncos. They're trying to continue to build around Russell Wilson. God bless him for doing so. And I hope it works out because I'm a big fan of Russell Wilson and I hope he figures it out. I'm hoping that he was more injured than he was letting on last year. Not because I hope that he's injured. I obviously don't wish anyone was injured. But it would explain some of his poor play and some of his weirdly bad throws that I haven't really seen Russell Wilson make during his career before last year. So, you know what? I'm giving it a B+ because I really like that they're building the offensive line and they already have a decent offense around Russell Wilson in terms of weapons. And they have a decent defense as well. Actually, honestly, probably not decent. Probably a little bit better than decent, excuse me. So, yeah, I'm giving it a B+, and I'm sticking to it. The Detroit Lions, I'm going to give it a B. And the reason is just because I think they just continue to really be tactical and smart with their money. They, a lot of teams are going to take, one player and give them $25, $30 million. The Lions aren't doing that. These are the contracts. Cam Sutton, 3 years, $33 million. Alex Anzalone, 3 years, $19 million. David Montgomery, 3 years, $18 million. John Kaminsky, 2 years, $9.5 million. So you know what? You put all those together, you have about $40 million per year, maybe 50, I'd say. And instead of giving that to one or two players, you're able to spread it out and get some quality players for multiple years, and you're going to continue to build through the draft and continue to make smart decisions both on and off the field. Now, because they are, you know what? I was kind of hoping that they would have a big flashy offseason this offseason because they should have made the playoffs last year if it weren't for some shenanigans towards the end. And they went on a huge run towards the end of the season where we all fell in love with the Lions and we all started believing. But it obviously just came up just a little bit short at the end because of obviously some seeding and some tiebreakers and all that jazz. But I love the direction of where the Lions are going. I was really hoping that they would, maybe trade Jared Goff for a higher draft pick and maybe trade up and be flashy. And there's still time to do so. There's still time to do all that, obviously, but it hasn't happened yet. So the jury's still out on the Lions for me, but I'm going to give it a B. It's solid. They made some good moves, but I'm hoping that they continue to build intelligently, but also show me the money and show me some salary cap stuff and show me a guy that's going to make $25, $30 million a year and be a difference maker on one side of the ball or the other. And get some weapons, please. Houston Texans, I am going to give them a B+. I actually can't believe it myself. I actually had to reread it because I was like, Houston Texans getting a good grade? What world am I living in? But anyways, I think that they had a solid offseason and they actually decided to spend some money and make some interesting trades. They traded for Shaq Mason from the Buccaneers, former all-pro Patriot offensive lineman who didn't have a good year last year in the Tampa Bay Buccaneer uniform. But you know what? Let's be honest, not a lot of people last year for the Bucs had a good year either. So I'm going to take it with a grain of salt and see what happens in Houston. They signed Robert Woods, who is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. He was so poorly used in Tennessee, it made me want to cry, and I was really hoping the Patriots would take a swipe at him, but whether they did or not, he didn't end up going there, and that's totally fine. Jimmy Ward, a good offensive lineman. Come on, buddy. A good defensive back. A little up there in age, but you know what? He's a good veteran presence over there. And obviously a few other moves like signing Noah Brown, signing Sheldon Rankins, things like that kind of just brings some more talent to a roster just completely depleted and completely devoid of it, quite frankly. And so, you know what? Good for the Texans. They're making some moves. They're doing some things for once. So I'm giving them a B+. Indianapolis Colts. I'm giving them a D. I do not like the offseason that the Colts have had. Samson and Bucom, sure. I guess that's fine. You re-signed your kicker for like $8 million a year or $6 million a year is something ridiculous. I think it's just a big overpay for a kicker no matter how good he is. And then you really didn't do anything other than that. I was really hoping they'd trade up to the number 1 pick. I think that they really just need to figure out their quarterback carousel at this point and draft somebody, and they didn't do that. And by the time they come around, there might not be any top-tier quarterback left. So we'll see, but I just don't like it. I don't think they did nearly enough to make me believe in what they're doing over there, so I'm going to give them a D. Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to give them a C. Another C, and again, I know some people think, and I've even done it sometimes, especially during like the NBA trade deadline where it's like Dwayne Dedman for cash. So I'm going to give it a C because who cares? And sometimes it's like that, but in this instance, it isn't. And I know that I've said C a few times already, but it's not because of indifference, at least not in this case. But most of the time in this one, it's not going to be because of indifference. It's going to be because they've done good and bad at basically the same turn. So for me, that it doesn't, the good or the bad doesn't really outweigh one or the other. They made some good moves, right? They retained Evan Ingram, albeit on a franchise tag. They signed Roy Robertson Harris, for a reasonable contract for his talent. And you know what? They signed C.J. Beathard. Sure, why not? Backup quarterback that no one cares about. But jokes aside, I know last year was kind of their big spending free agency this year, but you know what? You are in position to take advantage of being the best team in your division. I really wish they'd have done more. I really do. I felt like they should have. Maybe they didn't have the cap space or what have you. I don't really know. But either way, I was kind of hoping you'd get Trevor Lawrence at least one more weapon. I guess you kept Evan Ingram, which was important. So, I'm going to give it a C. Some good, some bad. Either way. Kansas City Chiefs, I'm giving a C+. The two big signings that I saw were Jawan Taylor and Charles Omenihu, offensive tackle and edge rusher, respectively. But you did lose Juju Smith-Schuster, who was an important cog on your offense last year. But, despite that, obviously the Kansas City Chiefs are the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to be just fine. They were fine without Tyreek Hill last year. They won a Super Bowl. So losing Juju Smith-Schuster, I'm sure they'll find somebody else, and they'll be able to jump right in and fill that need for the Chiefs just as good as anybody else can because of the Chiefs. So, C+ for me. I'm going to give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt here on their offseason. Not really much to report on that front, though. The Raiders, I'm going to give them a B-. And really, I kind of want to give it a worse grade, but I'm going to be nice because they're at least doing things. They're at least going out and making moves and, trying to be aggressive, which I feel is important considering that franchise is really in limbo. You're in a new city, a fairly new city. You've only been there for a few years. A fan base that's really, I'm sure, yearning and has been yearning for years for football, but now they finally have it. You want to give them the best product that you can. But you know what? I think keeping Josh Jacobs on a franchise tag, I think that helps for this year. Jimmy Garoppolo coming over from the 49ers, I think gives you a reasonably stable quarterback. I don't like the contract at all. Jimmy Garoppolo, as far as I'm concerned, is not worth any more than $15 million a year, and I will stick to it. I don't think he's a very good quarterback, but for me, I think, they needed a replacement for Derek Carr, and he cost about half the price of Derek Carr, I guess. So you know what? If you look at it from that perspective, it's a reasonable contract. I just don't think he's worth $20 million either. You signed Jacoby Myers from the Patriots, so I'm sad to see him go as a Patriots fan myself, but you know what? That's okay. He really should not be a number 1 wide receiver, and if we had paid him he would have probably had to have been paid number one wide receiver money, and it just wasn't going to work out. So that's fine with me. So that's a good signing as well. And then a couple of other smaller deals here and there as well. Nothing crazy flashy or anything like that other than maybe the Jimmy Garoppolo signing, but Jakobi Meyers is a good value at $11 million a year. I think he'll be a very good number two to Devontae Adams as number one. He gets open, he makes tough catches, and he's just a smart guy. Anybody that can have any kind of success in the Patriots system as a wide receiver is a guy that I'm sure will be fine wherever he goes. And obviously Josh McDaniels, the head coach of the Raiders, was the offensive coordinator for most of Jakobi Meyers' career up until last year. So, you know what? I think it's a good signing. I think they had a good offseason. Nothing crazy, but definitely not bad. B-. Chargers. I'm giving them a D. They didn't really do anything, and it kind of saddens me because, yes, they spent a lot of money. Again, they're another team that last year was their big free agency year. But I feel like, you have some holes on your roster and you need some more depth. And Trey Pipkins III at right tackle ain't going to do it, I don't think. And then, signing Eric Kendricks, all right, fine. He's been a good player for most of his career, but he's also getting up there in age. So I'm not so sure how much that's going to work out for them. And other than that, they didn't really do a whole lot. They didn't really re-sign anybody. Austin Eckler's looking to want out because their contract negotiations have stalled. I don't know, man. I don't know. Not really a big fan of the Chargers offseason right now. Speaking of not being a fan of the offseason, the Rams, D-. Yeah, very, very bad. They have not made any free agency moves whatsoever. They traded away Hunter Long, and that's about it. I mean, I think I might have said traded away. They traded for Hunter Long. My apologies. And you gave away Jalen Ramsey. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. I really don't. It's pretty bad. So, D-. On the flip side, the Miami Dolphins, the ones who were on the good side of the Jalen Ramsey trade, they had one of my favorite off seasons in the entire NFL. I'm going to give them an A. Obviously, the Jalen Ramsey trade was huge. Getting Mike White from the Jets, who I think is a really good backup quarterback to have in case Tua Tagovailoa does not continue to stay healthy. And then David Long was a really underrated signing as well. I love the offseason. I love the aggressiveness. I love that the Dolphins are going after the Bills. They feel like they can beat them. They feel like they can be the division king, and they are going for it, and they are spending the money. Now, they're not spending $30, $40 million a year for people, other than Jalen Ramsey on the contract. I don't know how much of that they'll be paying, though. But they're making really good moves. They're getting the depth up on their roster, which I think was a problem last year. So, love the offseason for the Dolphins. I'm giving it an A. The Minnesota Vikings, I'm giving a C+. Nothing they did really impressed me. Byron Murphy, I guess, is fine in the secondary. But, for a team that only lost, I think, 4 games last year, I wish that they would have been a little bit more aggressive. Obviously, you still lost in the first round of the playoffs, so maybe you're thinking, they're not too bad. And I guess Marcus Davenport is a good cog on that defense. But for me, I think that I wish that they would have done a little bit more, especially on the offensive side of the ball, where they're getting some more offensive linemen other than Garrett Bradbury, and then, maybe some more weapons. And look, I get it. Josh Oliver is there, but, I mean, I don't know much about the guy, and I try to know as many players as I can, and I don't really know much about John Oliver, which scares me considering there's not a lot of good tight ends in football right now. You have like 5 that are unbelievable, maybe 7, and then it just kind of tapers off from there. So for me, I'm not really sure why they have not been as aggressive as they should have been. So I'm going to give it a C+ for now. New England Patriots, my, of course, team. For those of you who saw it, I basically accidentally predicted that Jonathan Jones would re-sign with the Patriots. I recorded that the Thursday prior, and then I think it came out Monday of this week, maybe yesterday as of time of recording, whatever it was. And about 4 hours before the video about wanting to keep Jonathan Jones came out, they re-signed him, and I was like, well, okay, I guess I have a crystal ball. But nonetheless, I think they've had a good offseason. Obviously, re-signing Jonathan Jones was hugely important. They signed Juju Smith-Schuster, who, yes, he's replacing Jacoby Myers, so it's not like, we're adding Juju Smith-Schuster and keeping everybody else, so we're going to have all those weapons. We're not at this point, but you never know what we're going to do in the draft, obviously. I think they've re-signed pretty much everybody that they should have re-signed. Connor McDermott, James Ferentz, Raekwon McMillan, Carl Davis, Matthew Slater, and Jabril Peppers all returning, and I think that was huge. And you don't really see that from the Patriots very often. Most of the time, the Patriot way, as we kind of all know it, is you play well for us, and it doesn't matter because we're kicking you out because we don't feel like paying you. But they actually re-signed a decent amount of players, this offseason. They basically just didn't re-sign Jacoby Myers at this point. So, I think that they did a good job retaining their own talent. I wish that maybe they would have been a little bit more aggressive. I really like the Riley Reef signing. He was a former first-round pick of the Lions in, I believe, 2017, I want to say. Can't remember. But either way, he gives good depth. Might even start. Who knows? So, yeah, I think it was a decent offseason. Nothing flashy, nothing crazy other than signing Juju. I'm hoping that we take a run at Odell Beckham Jr. as well to really help out with our weapons. But I think that they did a good job getting some more weapons around Mac Jones. And we'll see if we re-sign Damian Harris at some point. I don't think it's going to happen. I think, probably Ramondre Stevenson's you're going to be your horse out of the backfield. And who knows? Derrick Henry might be on the trading block. Austin Eckler's on the trading block. Ezekiel Elliott is, hanging around in free agency right now. So you never know what other moves can be made for the Patriots or for any of these other teams. The jury's still out, obviously. These are coming out when they come out. So obviously it's still up for debate on all these teams. But for the Patriots, I'm giving them a B- for this offseason. The Saints, I'm giving a B. Those of you who follow the channel, I am probably a bigger Derek Carr fan than I ought to be. I think he's very underappreciated, and I think that if he had any kind of weaponry in Las Vegas, that he would be very, very good. And I've seen him play at an MVP level, albeit it was just for one season. But I've seen it, and you know what? I understand. A lot of the times I'd actually argue the opposite. If somebody has one good MVP season, that just means that it was a fluke. And you know what? It very well may have been a fluke. But I do think that he is underappreciated by fans. He's not underappreciated by his teams because they pay him. So it's one of those things where I loved that signing for the Saints. I think he brings stability. I think he brings good leadership. I think he brings consistency. So we'll see what he brings. And then obviously re-signing Michael Thomas was big. Tano Passanio is an underrated signing in my book. So I'm going to give them a B as well. The New York Football Giants. Another one of my favorite off seasons, even though I wish they hadn't. Because I don't like the Giants, but I got to give him an A. I mean, you traded for Darren Waller. Even if he just did that, I'd probably still give you a B+ if he did nothing else. Darren Waller, one of my favorite players in the NFL. Remember when I said that there's only about 7 tight ends in the NFL that are fantastic? He's one of them. He's probably number 3 as far as I'm concerned. I think it goes Travis Kelce, George Kittle, and then Darren Waller. And so for me, a huge trade, bringing in Bobby Okereke in as well to shore up the linebacker core. Obviously, re-signing Daniel Jones and franchise tagging Saquon Barkley. I wish it was flipped, but that's just me. And those of you who've watched my channel, I don't like Daniel Jones. I just don't. I don't think he's that good. I certainly don't think he's worth $40 million, although I would hope and pray that most New York Giant fans probably feel the same. But maybe you'd have just rather kept Daniel Jones and maybe counted on some development down the road. But for a guy who's averaged 13 touchdowns a season and 9 interceptions a season and 4 to 5 fumbles a season, is he worth $40 million? I don't know. I don't think so. But obviously the Giants know him better than I do. So we'll see how it pans out. That's literally the only reason I'm not giving it an A+, is because I think you massively overpaid for Daniel Jones. And I quite frankly think that it's going to be another Jared Goff situation where either this year or next year he's going to play so bad they're going to have to trade him. And it's just going to be a disaster. I hope that doesn't happen for the sake of Giants fans. I know you guys have waited long enough since 2011 for you guys to, be good again and be relevant and be back in playoff contention like you were this year, and it's great. And the rest of your team is really good. Your offensive line is really good. Your weapons need work but are still okay. Your defense is getting better and better and better every year. Saquon Barkley's an animal. Your coaching staff is one of my favorite in the NFL, maybe second favorite in the NFL to the Detroit Lions. And so maybe you feel like Daniel Jones is the answer. I don't think so, but that's not up for me to decide, so I'm giving it an A. The New York Jets. Now, as far as I know, it's not official, but Aaron Rodgers has come out and said he's playing for the Jets next year. So, as far as I'm concerned, unless the Packers try to pull some big strong arm situation where they just refuse to trade him, which I think is a bad idea at this point because he might not play for you if you don't trade him. And you have a team that's willing to trade for him and, the guy wants to go play for the Jets, so I feel like you just have to do it at this point. They're getting Aaron Rodgers. And let's be honest with ourselves. They may not only be a quarterback away, but they're easily a quarterback away from being a 3 to 4 seed, maybe even winning the division in the AFC East. I don't know if they'll win the division because guess what? Our division is fantastic. The Bills are obviously fantastic. The Dolphins were really good last year and are getting even better this year. The Patriots, you could say what you want. They're probably the worst team in the division right now, but they still were above 500 last year at the end of the year. It's not like they're a bad team. They're a good team. They would have won the division in a couple of divisions in football last year if they had that record. So they're not a bad team either. So if you're the Jets, you're in a really tough division. But I really feel like Aaron Rodgers makes New York Jets fans feel like they're going to make a postseason run, and I tend to agree with them. And for those of you who hate Aaron Rodgers watching this channel, is he not way better than Zach Wilson? By comparison to where the comparison would be like if I were to be compared to CJ Stroud. It's not close, the talent level there. I stink at everything, and CJ Stroud is a really good college quarterback that may even end up going number 1 in the draft this year. That's the talent difference in my mind from Aaron Rodgers to Zach Wilson. You could say, oh, well, really, they're both pro quarterbacks. I don't think Zach Wilson is a pro quarterback. I think he's awful. I think he's so bad that he doesn't deserve a spot in the NFL at this point until he shows me otherwise. That's just me. But I digress. I think that it's an A+. Might even be my only A+ of the entire of this entire thing. I can't remember off the top of my head. We'll see when I get to it. But A+. I mean, you can't really get any better. You signed Quincy Williams. You signed Alan Lazard, who brings even more weapons over to your team and makes your offense even better. That struggled mightily last year. Your offensive line is great. You have a top 3 defense in the NFL behind the 49ers. And who was the other team that was really good last year on defense? I'm blanking. But but either way, you have a top 3 defense in the NFL right now. And so, I think it was a pretty much perfect offseason as far as the Jets are concerned. Philadelphia Eagles, A-. That's the other defense. There you go. That I was thinking of the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia Eagles, A-. The reason it's not an A or an A+ is because you did cut Darius Slay. I understand that he has a big contract, and he didn't really play phenomenal last year. He played well, but he didn't live up to the contract. But you just made it to the Super Bowl. And Darius Slay is an important part of that defense. Why would you release him unless you plan to re-sign him for less money? I don't know. But I just didn't really think that, I just didn't really like that very much. Jason Kelce came back, which is great. You re-signed Brandon Graham for another year. I think you did fine. I think you're running it back for the most part, which is exactly what you need to do. So, A- for the Eagles. Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to give them a C-. I don't really particularly care for their offseason either. Those of you who have watched the channel also know I'm a big Larry Ogunjobi fan. I think he's very, very underappreciated, and so that's nice. But, Patrick Peterson's not going to solve you anything, and neither is Nate Herbig. or Cole Holcomb. I don't even know who Cole Holcomb is. Anybody know who Cole Holcomb is? Anyway, they signed him to a 3-year contract, so he must be pretty good, I guess. Yeah, doesn't really do much for me. C-. San Francisco 49ers. Like I said, fantastic defense last year, and they made it even better. They signed Javon Hargrave this year, so I'm giving them an A. I mean, I don't really think they have to do anything else other than that, but they did also re-sign Jake Brindle, or not re-sign, but sign him. I think that it was great. A great offseason for the 49ers. I think, again, another team that wants to run it back and believes they can win a Super Bowl. You got Jimmy G's contract off your books, so now you have some more money to make your defense even better. I mean, Javon Hargrave being added to that defense, yeah, that's going to be dangerous. I'm giving it an A. Seattle, I'm going to give it a B. You know what? Geno Smith, my goodness, who would have thought, right? $25 million per year. If you'd have told me last year that the Seattle Seahawks were going to pay Geno Smith $25 million per year, I'd have jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. But here we are in 2023, and it's happening, and I agree with it, which is just blowing my mind. And then obviously Dramont Jones as well, and Jaron Reed, and you re-signed Jason Myers to way too much money, so I guess that's good too. But anyways, point being, Seattle Seahawks had a good offseason. I still think you need some more weapons. I still think you need some more help in the secondary. But you know what? They're getting there, and you still have the draft. So I'm going to give it a B. Solid offseason for the Seahawks. We'll see where they go from here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to give it a D. I don't see where they're going. They re-signed Levante David for a year, which is fine. I know he's a leader on that team, so that's great. You brought in Jamel Dean, which is good. I think that secondary definitely needs some more help. But behind Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy Bunting, you just need some more. You need some more bodies out there. You need some more guys that are be consistent. Their defense wasn't very good. They couldn't really cover anybody. And you basically told your fan base you're going from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield. I don't know. I like Baker Mayfield a lot, but that's going to be a tough place to play for him, I think, after them going from Tom Brady. But we'll see. I don't really love any of the moves that they made. Jamel Dean was okay, and for that reason, I'm not giving it a D- or an F. I'm giving it a D. Tennessee Titans. I'm giving them a D-, though. That's for sure. I mean, woof. I don't know what's going on in Tennessee, but I have no earthly idea what direction they're going in. They have nothing on offense. Nothing. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, you're still sticking with Ryan Tannehill, I guess. I don't know. Is Malik Willis your answer at quarterback, maybe? Who knows? But Andre Dillard on their offensive line, the offensive line wasn't the problem. And that's the biggest, free agent move that they've made this offseason. Out of the 7 moves that they made, the 7 moves that they made, 3 of them were offensive linemen, and the offensive line is not the problem. They've been getting rid of offensive linemen over the last couple of years. Their offensive line is not the problem. So I just don't get it. I don't get it for the Titans. I think you basically ran all your wide receivers out of town. I just don't get it, man. I don't get it. You're not giving me any answers here, Tennessee. D-. Washington Commanders, I'm giving them a B. I thought last year when they re-signed Jonathan Allen that Daron Payne was for sure going to be gone. Now I'm concerned as to what they're going to do with Chase Young whenever he becomes a free agent in a couple of years or next year or whenever it is. But because they did re-sign Daron Payne, which I think is a brilliant move. He's fantastic. I think Chase Young is probably the most talented of the 3, but I think the best player of the 3 is probably Daron Payne in my mind. And then obviously offensive tackle Andrew Wiley as well. 2 really, really great signings there. And then, you add some depth pieces like Nick Gates and Danny Johnson as well. So I think that you really did a great job if you're the Commanders. I think that now you need to just solve your quarterback problem, and you will be golden. And unless I've missed anybody, I believe that's it, guys. So thank you guys so very much for joining me on this NFL free agency grade podcast. I appreciate it so very much. And like I said at the beginning, if you've stuck all the way around to the end and you want to see me talk about something that I haven't been able to talk about this week, please comment down below what you'd like me to talk about. And I will do my very best to get that out for you guys if the cries are loud enough. But Until next time, thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.